Trainee took over my cake decorating duties, tried to outdo me with disastrous results, and now I'm gathering evidence to prevent further chaos. As the title might imply, I work as a cake decorator for a small grocery chain in the Midwest. I've been doing this job for over 10 years now. Even though I'm self-taught, I'm confident in my skills, and my photo portfolio speaks volumes. More often than not, customers seek me out for custom designs, especially since I've become known for my freehand work on cakes. Some regulars come to me several times a year, so my reputation for high-quality cake decorating is pretty much set in stone. The downside? The workload is overwhelming, and I've been needing extra hands for a while. About a month ago, Jake walked into my life. Fresh out of college, Jake needed a side hustle while building his web design business. I could respect that. Everyone's got to start somewhere, and entrepreneurship takes guts. Jake did catch me off guard a bit. Male cake decorators are rare in my experience. In a decade of doing this, I've only met 2 others. I took Jake under my wing, teaching him the basics: crumb coating, main coats, restocking the display case, labeling, dating, marking out, slicing bread, you name it. The one boundary I set was clear: no taking cake orders unless I wasn't there. I explained my method. Freehanding means every detail counts, so I fill out the order forms with specifics and sketch on the back to make sure I match the customer's vision. If I'm not around and a complicated order pops up, whoever's present can take it, but then I'll call the customer myself. Jake assured me he understood. Once his training wrapped up and we started working side by side, certain things became obvious pretty fast. I knew Jake wasn't in this for the long haul. He had a business to build, and baking was just another job for him. But the way he started acting rubbed me the wrong way. Almost immediately, he began bossing everyone around. If someone mislabeled bread, Jake would snap at them, making them redo everything while tearing them down. I saw a new girl almost in tears from one of his rants. Then came the day I returned from my day off and found the display case completely changed. Technically, it's not a huge deal, but we have a store planogram to follow. If a district manager saw the chaos, I'd be the one in hot water because the display is my responsibility. When I asked Jake about it, he said he thought it looked better the way he organized it. Some parts, admittedly, made sense, but he'd stacked every sheet cake on the top shelf, making it impossible for customers to see the designs. He'd crammed all the ready-made cakes in a corner and piled single-serve desserts on the bottom shelf, pulling out way too much inventory. I had to transfer it all back to the freezer, a process that wasted a good hour. I made Jake help fix his mess while I checked on my cake orders. That's when my blood ran cold. Jake proudly announced that he'd already finished all the cakes. My cakes. The 9 custom cakes ordered the week before were sitting in the cooler, and they looked like a disaster. Jake didn't have the training to decorate, and I hadn't taught him that part yet. He could manage writing on a cake, apply a basic coat, and do simple borders, but not much else. All 9 cakes had to be scraped and 4 had to be completely remade in under 2 hours to meet their pickup times. I churned through a lot of frosting and was starting to fume. Meanwhile, Jake was annoyed that I'd ruined his work, insisting, I took my time, they looked so good. They did not look good, and I can't send them out like that, I shot back. Don't blame me because you're too slow, he retorted. I don't have hiring or firing power as just the decorator, but Jake's incompetence was glaringly obvious. Still, I had too much on my plate to argue, so I sent him to help at the bread counter. For a couple of days, things seemed to return to normal. Jake toned down his act, and I chalked his earlier outburst up to stress, but I kept watch. One day, while slicing an enormous bread order, I saw Jake assisting a customer, one of our pickiest regulars who demands her cakes just so. He showed her something on his phone, took out an order form, and filled it in before slipping it into my folder. When he wasn't looking, I snatched up the form. My jaw nearly hit the floor. He'd taken an order for a massive specialty cake, a 3-tier, fondant-covered wedding masterpiece with hundreds of flowers and edible glitter. The price tag alone would be in the hundreds, and there was absolutely no way we could make it in a grocery store setting. We didn't have the supplies, facilities, or equipment for such a cake. It wasn't even in our system. Jake absolutely knew by then that we couldn't accommodate orders like this, and he even wrote that the customer had requested me. I confronted him on the spot and told him flatly that I couldn't make that cake. With a smirk, he said, so you actually cannot do this kind of cake. Want me to do it for you? The nerve. I could do the cake, just not in a retail setting, and definitely not through our store's system. I demanded to know what his problem was. He responded, I think I deserve some more credit for all the work I've done to help you. I looked him dead in the eye and said, Jake, I trained you in the basics to lighten my load, not to take over my job or make more work for me. You don't know how to decorate cakes, and those cakes you made created a mess I had to fix. If you want to learn, I'll gladly teach you when there's time. But for now, stay in your lane and do what I trained you for. Then I left him, heading off to call my regular customer and pray she'd be in a forgiving mood. I had to accept that I couldn't pull off the kind of cake the customer wanted. She wasn't pleased, and ultimately I had to promise her a discount just to smooth things over. I genuinely felt I was being reasonable with Jake during all of this. Apparently, I was wrong, because things with him got exponentially worse after that. About a day or 2 after that particular incident, I came into the shop one morning to find Jake absent. But what I did see was that he'd gone ahead and completed all of my orders from the previous evening, again. And, once more, the cakes looked absolutely horrendous. Just like before, I had to scrape everything off and redo every single cake he'd touched. To make matters worse, he had crumb-coated every single round cake base we had, stacking them up, mass production style, on a rack in the freezer. Suddenly, I had no blank rounds for future orders and a ridiculous amount of crumb-coated rounds, all in a single flavor. Huge problem. I was forced to order 4 more boxes of rounds just to have enough variety for upcoming work. But the chaos didn't end there. Jake also went after the newer baker girl again. This time, he pushed her to the point of actual tears just because he decided the happy birthday Ryan she'd written on a cake wasn't good enough. To make everything even more stressful, Jake tried to report me to the manager, accusing me of discriminating against him because he's black. Honestly, I'm not even sure if he is or isn't. His skin is olive-toned? Either way, I'd never said a single thing about his ethnicity, so I have no idea where that accusation even came from. At this point, it feels like he's actively trying to drive me insane. All of this happened over about 3.5 weeks. When Jake is good, he's genuinely very good at what he does. But when he's bad, he's like the devil in a blue ball cap. Fast forward to today, I'm exhausted, frustrated, and totally frazzled. Unfortunately, all I have as proof of his antics is word of mouth. My managers openly avoid getting involved in employee squabbles, making it clear they expect us to settle it out of court, so to speak. It's a small franchise, only 3 stores, so there's not really an HR department to go to for help. After all this, I was desperate for advice. Holy hell, once I sought out advice, the response I got was absolutely wild. After reading through it all, I felt a sense of relief drown out my frustration. First off, I'm seriously grateful for all the advice and support. To address a few consistent points, yes, it's infuriating and ridiculous that the store's policy forbids phones, and management will come down hard on anyone caught with one. But, I realized I might have a workaround. If I sneak a few of Jake's cakes, the ugly ones, and some of the wasted frosting into the smaller blast freezer where we store the ice cream, I can potentially use that mess as physical evidence. I'm ready to give that a shot. I also haven't touched the crumb-coated rounds yet and, crucially, I did save that botched order Jake took for our notoriously prickly regular customer. On top of that, I've started documenting every hour I spend fixing his mistakes, every ruined cake, and how much money the waste is costing us. It's true what everyone says, money talks, often louder than words, and it's time I use that to my advantage. Honestly, conflict resolution has never been my strong suit. Being a cake decorator is usually perfect for me. I get to work alone and be creative without many interruptions. I've been lucky, I've never had to deal with a Jake before now, and it's completely uncharted territory for me. That's why I sought out advice, and I appreciate every bit of guidance. I can't say how long it'll take to gather enough evidence to bring to the owner, but I give my word, when something happens, I'll come back with an update. Update 1. Okay, it's the weekend and Jake isn't scheduled to work today or tomorrow. Yesterday, we had 4 cake orders come in, with 2 due tomorrow. Despite my clear instructions not to touch those orders, Jake went ahead and made them anyway. Unsurprisingly, the cakes look like a disaster. I wish I could share photos of the wreckage, but I won't risk my job by sneaking in my phone. Sure, plenty of people around here bend that rule, and Jake isn't the only one, but honestly, I've got bigger things to worry about. I carried those hideous cakes into the blast freezer over in Derry and told the department lead to leave them alone for the time being. After that, I emailed the store owner directly. I laid everything out, how Jake keeps disregarding instructions, ruining orders, and exactly what's been happening lately. I told him I have proof and that I'd be willing to show him if he's able to stop by. Some of the other bakery staff agreed to back me up when he does. They're as fed up as I am. He's supposed to swing by tomorrow to see what's going on. I actually feel more comfortable talking to the owner than to the new manager. He's a lot more laid back and easy to approach. In the meantime, I'm remaking the orders myself with fresh cakes and not scraping or reusing anything. Inspired by some advice I got, I even saved a big bowl of scraped icing from Jake's old botched attempts. That's stashed in the blast freezer too, well out of Jake's sight, just in case the owner can't make it tomorrow. Update 2. I wanted to share an update about the chaos Jake was causing at my bakery job, and how things finally came to a head just a couple of days ago. To set the scene, I've known the owner, Henry, for about 6 years, ever since he took over. He's about as chill as business owners come, always approachable, but I'm honestly not sure who he bought the place from since the last guy kept to himself. Henry asked me to meet him for coffee and chat outside of the bakery, and that's when I spilled everything. I told him about Jake, how he'd been harassing the bakers nonstop, always glued to his phone even though there are rules, and worst of all, how he never stopped trying to take over my orders. Henry listened closely, concern all over his face, and told me he'd be dropping by on Tuesday. Sure enough, Tuesday rolled around and Henry arrived. In the 2 days since our coffee meeting, Jake had not only continued hijacking my orders, but he'd also started ordering inventory on my behalf. By the time I caught wind of it, it was too late and, just my luck, we were going to be buried under 20 boxes of white sheet cakes. Classic. So when Henry sidled in that morning and found Jake clumsily decorating one of my orders, it was all I could do to keep from grinning as I remembered the advice I'd gotten about just letting Jake dig his own grave. I busied myself slicing bread, keeping a casual eye on the scene. Henry strolled over to Jake, clearly irritated, and asked what in the world he was doing. Poor Jake looked totally perplexed, probably had no clue who Henry even was, then tried to explain that he was decorating a cake for a customer. Henry just looked at him and said, "I thought you were hired as a bakery assistant. I don't believe this is your job." Jake desperately tried to cover himself, claiming I was training him. I calmly corrected him, I was not. Henry nodded and motioned for both of us to follow him, leading us to the blast freezer. I'd kept everything from Jake's previous disasters hidden away in there, 11 mangled cake orders, 4 bowls of ruined frosting, an entire rack of over-prepped, crumb-coated rounds, plus another rack, just in case we ran out of disasters, a bizarre 4-tiered cake Jake must have whipped up when I was off, and a sad stack of miserably decorated cupcakes. I explained to Henry that Jake was responsible for all of it, and Jake looked enraged, demanding, "Why are these here? These were orders. You didn't give the customers their orders?" I kept calm and told him I'd remade everything, because, honestly, no one would have accepted those horrors. Henry agreed with me, pointing out just how unacceptable those cakes looked. He turned to Jake, demanding to know what he had been thinking. Jake, still digging, insisted he was being efficient and, for some bizarre reason, wanted to decorate even more rounds to finish faster than I could. At that point, I was seeing red, but Henry just sighed, told Jake to follow him to the manager's office, and sent me back to work. I was on pins and needles afterward, clueless about what would happen next. Then about an hour later, Henry came back. He apologized for everything and let me know he'd fired Jake for product waste and insubordination. Turns out, Jake got mouthy with him too. Henry promised me help and brought in Jay, the newer baker girl, until a replacement could be hired. To this day, I still don't get what was going through Jake's mind. My husband thinks he was just arrogant and assumed he could replace me for the sake of it, though I can't understand why anyone would want to hijack my job if they didn't care about baking. Some people say folks with tech jobs think other jobs are beneath them. Who knows? All I know is, I'm glad I don't have to decipher Jake's madness anymore. Jay is already proving to be infinitely steadier and more talented with a piping bag. No contest there. Update 3, I thought the storm had passed once Henry fired Jake. Joke's on me. 2 days later, a woman in a sparkly quinceañera jacket marched into the bakery with a printed email and a look that could peel fondant. She told me she was here to approve the mock-up for her daughter's 3-tier purple quince cake from the new website. My stomach dropped through the floor. We don't have a website for orders. We never have. She slid me the confirmation, complete with our store logo lifted straight from our flyer and a big cheery "confirmed by Jake, lead decorator" splashed across the bottom. There was even a deposit receipt routed through some payment app tied to a name that looked suspiciously like one of his slick business handles. I asked her to give me 10 minutes and walk straight to Henry's office, because I needed him to see it with his own eyes before I said the words I knew were coming out of my mouth. We pulled up the site on his phone, bright, clean, and absolutely fraudulent, full of my work photos pulled from our corkboard. You could even see my fingernail polish in one of them, and a page that called Jake head pastry chef. He'd thrown together a decent-looking order form too, with dates and times and rush fee checkboxes. The email the mom had was generic, with canned lines, "We can do that for you," and it promised sugar flowers, edible glitter, the works, due Saturday by noon. It wasn't even noon yet and I could feel the clock drilling a hole in my spine. I told Henry the first could give her a cake worthy of a quince, but it wouldn't be a fondant-covered Princess Tower. Not in our kitchen. Not by tomorrow. He nodded, jaw tight, and told me to go talk to her while he dealt with the site. The mom was understandably furious at first, and I don't blame her. Once I explained that the site wasn't ours, and that I would personally build her daughter something elegant and celebratory if she let me rework the design, she went quiet. Then she glanced at her daughter's photo on her lock screen and asked what I could do in a day. I pulled a cake board out and sketched with a Sharpie, 3 buttercream tiers, a smooth plum ombre that deepened toward the base, sugar pearls tucked into the borders, a cascade of silk violets, "We sell food-safe ones in floral, thank every grocery deity," and a hand-lettered 15 in gold. It wouldn't be the promise on that fake email, but it would be beautiful. She stared at the sketch, then nodded once and said, "Okay. Please don't let my girl down." We got to work like our aprons were on fire. Jay started baking rounds in every size we had that matched purple ombre in my brain. I ran the mixer like a race car, turned out sheet after sheet of buttercream on parchment so we could swoop it on fast and smooth, and threw bubble tea straws into sanitizer because we were going to need internal supports. Henry came jogging back in long enough to tell me he'd called the police to file a report and his cousin's lawyer for a takedown, then taped signs on every entrance. "We do not accept online cake orders. Please order in person at the bakery counter." He took photos of the site and every email the mom had and told me to save my sketch too, just in case. While layers cooled, a second woman showed up with the same kind of email and a receipt for a custom baby shower cake she said was for that afternoon. My eye twitched. Henry handled her, apologized, offered to comp a half sheet with buttercream florals on the house, promised to make it right, and I piped a whole garden onto that cake so fast my hand cramped. The relief in her face once she saw it made my chest unclench. Meanwhile, Jay and I assembled the quince tiers with a rhythm that would have impressed a marching band. Crumb coat, chill, smooth coat, chill. I set up a turntable on an overturned Cambro so I could stand and swirl the ombre just right, and Jay stood beside me, passing me progressively darker bowls of buttercream like we were doing some kind of color guard routine. I free-handed the 15 in melted white chocolate, painted it with luster dust, and tucked it into a bed of piped rosettes so it sat proud and steady. We anchored each tier with straws, stacked with a prayer, and when it wobbled the tiniest bit, I cut 2 more supports and slid them in without breathing. At some point in this frenzy, the delivery guy rolled in the first wave of those 20 boxes of white sheet cakes Jake had helpfully ordered. He wheeled the pallet right past me while I was carving an edge and did a double take at the tower of purple. "Whoa," he said, which is delivery guy for not bad, and I just nodded because my whole soul was frosting. Henry had someone from the front move the boxes into dry storage and told me he'd sort that mess later. Bless him. We finished the quince cake with 20 minutes to spare. I stepped back and actually smiled. It was elegant. The silk violets sat like they were born there. The ombre looked seamless, the pearls were neat, and the 15 caught the light just enough to feel special without screaming. We lifted the cake into a carrier that barely contained it, and I walked it out myself. The mom put a hand over her mouth when she saw it and started crying the quiet kind of tears that tell you the last 6 hours of your life were not in vain. She hugged me and told me her daughter's favorite color was exactly that purple, and suddenly the lack of feeling in my forearms was worth it. Henry comped part of the order to cover the deposit she'd lost, and he took down her information in case the police needed a statement, but mostly he just let the relief settle over the counter like powdered sugar. By the time we washed up, the fake site was down. Henry's cousin's lawyer didn't mess around. The police took the reports, the quince mom, the baby shower lady, and one other poor soul who called from the parking lot after seeing the sign, and gave Henry a case number. We don't know if anything will stick, that's above my pay grade. But Henry pulled up the payment handle listed on the receipts and let out a laugh that sounded like it hurt. It wasn't subtle. He sent all of it to the lawyer. He didn't call Jake, he didn't need to. The fallout the next morning was almost weirder. Our Google listing had 3 brand new 1-star reviews claiming the decorator discriminates and refused my order, all posted within an hour of each other, all with profile photos of scenic waterfalls and 2 friends named Abe. Henry responded with a short, careful note about a fraudulent website and active police report, attached a photo of the sign on our door, and asked anyone affected to call the store directly. Then the quince mom uploaded a shot of her daughter in a sparkly purple dress, grinning behind my cake like it was the crown jewel of her party, and wrote a paragraph thanking the real decorator for stepping in. I didn't cry, but I did have to go in the freezer for a second and look at the boxes of white sheet cake until my eyes cooled off. A few days later, Henry called me into the office. He told me he hated that it took a circus for him to realize how rickety our order process had been, and he asked me to fix it. He offered me a raise and a lead role across all 3 stores to standardize how we take and produce orders. He ordered a lockable cabinet for order forms and a fireproof binder that lives inside my reach, not in the general pile of bakery chaos. He hired Jay on full-time and told me to train her up on tiering and lettering as soon as she's comfortable. He also asked if I'd sit with a local designer he trusts to build an actual informational page, no orders, just clear instructions and photos that we own, so nobody can pull a stunt like that again. It felt surreal and, honestly, good. I've spent a decade pretending the art side is all that matters, but it turns out paperwork can save your behind. We're still swimming through the aftermath. There are still too many white sheets in the freezer and I'm starting to think we'll be eating trifle until Labor Day, but the kitchen feels sane again. Jay's steady hand saved my life that weekend. Henry's been on the floor more. The bakers aren't flinching anymore. And my pensive regular with the impossible requests? She brought me a coffee and told me I could talk her out of fondant any time I wanted. I laughed harder than I have in weeks. Update 4. I thought we'd earned a breather. Then Henry stuck his head around the corner on a Thursday and asked how fast I could make a pretty table happen. The local bridal expo had a bakery cancel. His florist friend had slipped our name to the coordinator, and apparently Saturday was the answer whether I liked it or not. We do not do expos. We do buttercream and birthday candles and last minute can you write happy birthday buddy bigger? In a strip mall grocery. But I looked at the mountain of white sheets still clogging the walk-in like a snowdrift and said sure. Jay grinned at me like we were about to rob a bank. We flipped into chaos mode. I cut the sheets down, layered them with lemon curd and raspberry jam, and pressed them under sheet pans like we were flattening laundry. Jay boiled a quick pour-over glaze and we dipped squares until the rack looked like a checkerboard. I frosted 2 dummy tiers I found in floral under a stack of wreaths, sealed, food safe, bless our over-ordering floral lead, smoothed buttercream hard enough to get that sharp, fake fondant look, and piped pearls while Jay brushed luster dust into the seams. We boxed everything, loaded it into Henry's ancient minivan that smells permanently like bananas, and rolled into the expo the next morning with a wobbly table and a banner that looked suspiciously like someone had ironed our logo onto a tablecloth. It was fine. It had to be. We got our table dressed and I was just setting the turntable dead center when my stomach turned to sleet. Across the aisle, 2 booths over, was Jake. He'd propped a vinyl sign on a stand with a name that sounded like my store had married a Pinterest board. The font was clean. The slideshow was cleaner, and half of the photos were mine. Not just looks like mine. Mine. The blue geode with the jagged sugar edge, where I'd chipped a corner and patched it with a shard because I'm a human being. There it was, blown up. You could see the crooked vein I still grumble about. He'd printed business cards that read executive pastry chef like he'd been born in a toque. Couples were lining up, QR codes were out, and one poor guy was trying to hold 3 tasting cups while his fiancée asked about a suspended chandelier cake. I didn't say anything. I walked to Henry, who was tottering in with a bucket of silk peonies we'd begged off Floral, tapped his elbow, and pointed. He didn't say anything either. He stared for a beat, then peeled off toward the coordinator while I turned back to our table, smiling so hard my molars hurt, and started talking about crumb coats. It was surreal, playing Bakery Carnival Barker while people did double takes between our table and his. Jay kept the samples moving like a blackjack dealer. I piped tiny rosettes onto the corners of the squares and answered questions about delivery fees and temperature and how buttercream behaves if the reception is in a barn in July. I heard Henry's low voice a few booths away, the coordinator's oh no, the click of a radio. Someone in a polo with a lanyard arrived. Then a security guard. Then 2. I didn't look. I talked about dowels and support and why we don't hang cakes from ceilings unless you want to cry on your wedding night. The moment I did look, it was because the slide on Jake's TV flipped to a photo of the quince cake from last weekend. My 15. My hombre. My health took a vacation to my ankles. Henry was standing with the expo coordinator and 2 security guards at the edge of Jake's booth, holding out a printout. He must have brought the police report. The coordinator came over to me, voice soft, asked if I could point out which cakes were mine in the slideshow. I didn't have to move. I pointed at my fingernail in one, my weird habit of putting 3 pearls then a gap then 2 pearls in another. They killed the power strip to his booth. Jake tried to yank the plug back, then realized 3 cameras were out and half the room was pretending not to watch. He packed hard and fast, sweeping stacks of cards into a crate, yanking table skirting like a magician with arthritis. He left the TV and a tablet on the table. Security asked him to wait. He didn't. He rolled a suitcase out the side entrance and disappeared into the gray. Not that it helped him. Henry sent me a tiny nod and held up the tablet like a scorecard. A QR code was still open to his payment page, little notification dings popping with the optimism of people losing deposits to a ghost. The coordinator called the police. I kept piping. It was the strangest afternoon of my career. Couples who had wandered over to ask if we do fondant wound up staying to talk buttercream because I had a very neat visual aid 2 booths over of what not to trust. I showed them sample boards I'd whipped together, a swatch of Swiss meringue, a swipe of American, a scrape of naked finish like I was matching paint chips, and watched the panic leave faces when I said the words sturdy and heat and we won't promise a thing we can't do in a grocery kitchen. Jay started joking that our pitch was honest is the new fancy, which made 3 bridesmaids cackle in a way that made my whole day. By closing, Henry had given statements twice, the expo had posted an alert to their page, and the police had taken the tablet and the TV as evidence. The coordinator asked if we wanted to pack up early. We stayed and met a grandma who liked my handwriting enough to ask for a consult on a buttercream scrollwork redo of her own 1978 wedding cake for her 50th. I said it would be my honor so fast I almost tripped. Monday morning, the health inspector showed up, because of course she did. Anonymous complaint, unsafe storage, non-food safe flowers, blast freezer misuse. My bones went cold for a flicker. Then I walked her to Floral and handed her the packaging from the exact silk violets we'd used on the quince. Food-safe picks, sealed stems. We opened the blast freezer. There was nothing unlabeled except a pan of croissant dough that our baker babies keep wrapping like they're hiding treasure. Thermometers were in the right places, sanitizer strips were where sanitizer strips should be, and when she wrinkled her nose at our display case thermometer dangled. By, like, hope and a twist tie, I grabbed Jay, and we fixed it while she watched. We got dinged for a clipboard living on top of a Canberra lid. I'll take that all day. Henry got a call that afternoon from the detective handling the earlier report. The expo handed over what they had. The tablet turned out to be a gold mine. Emails, payment logs, templates written in that weirdly chirpy tone he'd used on the quince mom, even a draft page with change logo before launch under a screenshot of ours. It's not my business what charges end up sticking. I will say I slept the kind of sleep you only earn by piping 200 miniature roses for strangers you'll never see again. Here's the part that feels like the real turn. Henry didn't let the expo just be a story. He told me to build us a table that could roll into any room and tell the truth. We cleared a shelf, and I made a binder the size of a toddler, laminated boards with finishes and flavors, photos we took on a backdrop he bought from the party also their hours, a printed sheet that says, in plain English, what we do and what we don't. He ordered a locking cage for the extra dummies. He had maintenance bolt a small camera above my workbench, not to spy on me, he said it out loud, bless him, but to have a record when we need to prove which hands did what. Jay stood next to me while I wrote house-style scripts for congrats and happy birthday so we can match each other line for line. I taught her how to stack a 2-tier with bubble tea straws, and she, this kid who cried when Jake sneered at her script weeks ago, piped a border so even I did a double take. The Quint's mom came back in with her daughter and a slice saved in a container I swear was older than me. The purple had held. We ate it standing up at the counter, me with a fork I'd pulled out of dish and wiped on a towel, her girl in a sparkly jacket, both of them talking about the moment the room gasped when they carried it in. It tasted like butter and sugar and relief. Jay cried. I pretended not to. A weird footnote, that sea of white sheet cakes? We carved them into tasting squares and teacher appreciation specials all week and still had enough to build a cupcake mountain for a school fundraiser Henry donated to without asking me first. The mountain looked ridiculous and perfect and a little bit like we turned a mess into something that fed people, which is essentially the whole job. I don't know if we've seen the end of Jake popping up like a bad penny, but I know this, the kitchen feels like it belongs to us again. The orders live in a locked box. The sketches live in a binder that shuts like a vault. The people who show up at my counter look me in the eye and ask me what I can do, not what some phantom promised them for a fee. And when I pull a turntable onto a Cambro and spin buttercream until it looks like satin, there's nobody hovering with a phone trying to prove he can do it faster. Update 5. I keep thinking we're done with plot twists, and then life throws on an apron and says one more round. Sunday afternoon, church crowd milling, I'm boxing a cookie cake for a 9-year-old who wants a soccer ball and a unicorn on the same field, and out of my peripheral I catch a blur slip under the half gate that separates our counter from the aisle. Not a customer misstep. A deliberate duck, he goes straight for the work table where the binder lives now, hands sure like someone showed him a map. He grabs the binder and bolts. Jay yelped. I didn't yelp. I said the kind of word you only say in walk-ins and started running. The binder is not light, it's laminated pages and hard sleeves and 3-hole punched sanity. It knocked into his knees and slowed him a hair, just long enough for Henry to step out from the end cap with the loyalty cards like a bouncer in a polo. The kid juked, skirted a display of brioche that did exactly what brioche does, crumb everywhere, and juked again around a woman with a stroller. He made it to the automatic doors. The doors opened like they'd been paid. He was gone. I came up short at the threshold to produce because I am not built for track and I am definitely not getting flattened in the entryway by someone's cart. Henry hit his radio. We got maybe 3 seconds of the kid's face before he was a hood and a backpack vaulting into the passenger seat of a sunburnt sedan with a blacked out plate cover. The camera that Henry had put above my bench? It got him full on. The one at the door got the plate when the light hit just right and sent glare away. Jay had already thrown the deadbolt on our half gate and was holding a cupcake pan like she was going to George Foreman somebody if they tried it twice. The whole thing took 19 seconds. I know because I watched it on the replay 5 times with my stomach in my shoes. Henry called the detective directly. He was at our counter within half an hour. Apparently someone just sprinted off with the thing you told him existed moves a case along. He took the footage, took our statements, took a look at the crate where the binder normally lives and then at the crate where it lives now, with a padlock the size of my fist, and did that nod that says, yes, criminals are both bold and unimaginative. The weirdest part, they found the binder. Not 2 hours later, a cart pusher radioed that there was a backpack stuffed into a planter by the cart corral. The binder was in it, minus a handful of plastic sleeves and 1 page of our house scripts. Whoever pulled the snatch either panicked or didn't like homework. The sleeves they took were the ones with sketches, hand-drawn toppers and layouts with dates, none of which would make sense to anyone, but me or Jay. The page of scripts made my mouth go dry, though. It had my happy birthday and congratulations in the sizing we use. It'd take a photocopier to fake it. Or a very patient hand and too much time. The detective called later that night. The kid was a high school junior, says he got $50 via a payment app from someone named Jay to grab a black binder from by the cake fridge at the grocery. He was very clear it needed to be before 2. I had a pickup at 2, of course I did. The kid gave them a handle. The handle matched the one on those fake deposit receipts. I stood in my kitchen with my keys in my hand and laughed like it hurt. 2 days later, I wore my good black pants to municipal court with buttercream under a fingernail I swear I scrubbed. The detective had asked if I could show up in case the judge wanted to look at the materials or ask anything about the expo mess and the fake site. I sat on a bench between the Quint's mom in her sparkly jacket and the baby shower lady with the kind eyes and a folder of printouts. Henry was there, a very out-of-place iceberg in a room full of winter coats, and he had copies, too. A different kind of quiet fell when they brought Jake in. He'd polished up. Crisp white shirt, blue tie, hair slicked like butter. He looked at me and then didn't. The hearing wasn't dramatic. No gavel slamming, no yelling. The judge had a voice like a librarian and the patience of someone who has watched a lot of versions of the same bad idea. The detective talked through the expo, the fake site, the deposits. The Quint's mom talked about showing up with a teenage girl who was expecting something out of a movie and getting a cashier who had to break her heart at the door. The baby shower lady held up her receipt and the house cupcake we'd boxed for her when we couldn't make time shift on a Saturday. The coordinator from the expo had sent a statement. It wasn't about me, which felt like a relief until the judge asked me to step up with the binder. I opened to a laminated sheet, the buttercream finishes. I pointed out that in one of the stolen photos, you could see the tiny nick on my turntable base that looks like a crescent moon. I pointed to the pearls, 3, then a gap, then 2, my muscle memory. It felt stupid until the judge said, "Details matter," and wrote something down, and then I didn't feel stupid anymore. Jake said he thought we had an understanding, as if there had been any version of an understanding where he ran a shadow bakery out of my portfolio. His voice got a little louder when he said Henry never warned him properly about scope of duties. Henry's eyebrows went up like they were trying to leave his face. The judge asked Jake if he was licensed with the county for home food production. He said yes, then kind of, then I was planning to. The judge wrote a lot. In the end, I don't know what all of it adds up to on a sentencing sheet or in a file, only that the judge put in a no-contact order for me, the bakery, Henry, and Jay by name, and that restitution started showing up in the conversation like a word with teeth. When they asked about the binder snatch, the detective slid the payment screenshots across. The judge looked at Jake. Jake looked at his hands. The judge told him he was not clever, which is the kind of sentence I will carry to my grave. I walked out shaking like I'd run a mile and found myself in a hug I didn't ask for and didn't know I needed from a woman in a sparkly jacket who smells like the inside of a bakery from my childhood, vanilla and hope. It would have been poetic if the day were done. It was not. I got back to the store to a chorus of cursing from behind the walk-in. Our big freezer, the dependable old girl who hums like a freight train, was dead. Panel lights on, compressor quiet as a mourner. She gave a little wheeze around 10, our youngest baker said, eyes wide, and my heart did the math without asking me. Thawed rounds, thawed cupcakes, thawed sheet cake snowdrift. There's a tone that dropped into my voice that I only get when something is on fire and I need everyone to do exactly what I say. We moved. The blast freezer was not big enough for the pile, but we could triage. Jay and I grabbed the fully frozen items first, triaging like ER nurses. Mystery tubs? Back into reach in. Frosting? Fine for hours. Raw dough? To the front of the line, into the functioning reach in like it was a lifeboat. The white sheet cakes of doom were sweating. We could either cry or cut. Teacher appreciation is still next week, right? Henry said, voice from somewhere over my shoulder. We spun icebox specials so fast you could smell the brainstorm. I layered sheet cake with lemon pudding, the box stuff that will outlast cockroaches, zested real lemons over it like absolution, and topped it with whipped cream and blueberries. Jay cubed 2 trays into trifle jars with leftover ganache and raspberry jam like she was dealing cards. We made build-your-own sundae bars but for cake, sheet squares, a ladle of warm fudge, a spoon of sprinkles, a rosette. We put a hand-lettered sign at the front, freezer hiccup. These are fresh, tasty, and priced like a hiccup. They left our case as fast as we filled it. One lady bought 6 because my office is in a mood. The maintenance guy showed up, found a frayed wire that looked like it had outlived 2 owners, and called his cousin who handles compressors. They propped the freezer door open with a case of corn dogs and replaced things with names I don't know while we kept scooping product into the blast, into reach-ins, into mouths. It smelled like chocolate and adrenaline. By the time our regular with the impossible requests came by for a loaf of bread and a chat about a cake she wants that looks like lace but tastes like not having a breakdown, the hum was back. I could have kissed that hum. If the day had ended with the humming freezer, it would have counted as a win. But a man in a hotel chef coat with his name stitched in perfect embroidery walked up to the counter right as I finished smoothing the top on the last chocolate trifle. He introduced himself, said he was the banquet chef for the big hotel downtown, and then he said a name I knew too well. Do you do collaborations? Jake, reached out to us a month ago about a suspended chandelier cake for a late summer wedding. My GM flagged something about a police report, and then we saw your expo pictures on the coordinator's Facebook. I stared at his coat like it might bite me. He put his hands up fast. I'm not here to hire a phantom, he said. I want to know what's possible in the real world. We've got brides asking for physics to bend. We do not need tears on marble. So I took him to the binder. I showed him buttercream finishes. I showed him supports. I pulled a handful of bubble tea straws out of the sanitized jar and tapped the binder page like it was scripture. He watched my hands like the answer was in my wrist, which it sort of is. I told him we don't hang cakes from ceilings because I like sleeping. I told him we can build height and drama with acrylic stands and internal boards and that bubble tea straws are life. He asked if I'd come by on a slow afternoon and teach his pastry apprentices how to stack and transport a tiered cake that won't tip in a freight elevator. Henry, who had materialized the moment the word hotel floated over the counter, negotiated like the seasoned lemonade stand owner he is. The chef set a rate that made me blink, said they'd credit the store directly and pay me as a contracted trainer through them so everything lives above board. I heard myself say yes while holding a cupcake scoop like a microphone. The binder, by the way, now lives in a locking crate that bolts to the table when we're not using it. The camera at my bench catches the second you open it. Jay, who has the same keys I do now, snapped the pallet wrap on a stack of new sleeves like she was sealing a treasure chest. She's been practicing the house scripts until our happy birthday looks like it was signed by the same hand. Yesterday she piped a cursive anniversary so pretty I grabbed the camera and clicked a still from the footage just to keep it forever. One more ripple, a letter showed up addressed to me, neat handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a photocopy of a newspaper clipping from 2 towns over. Local woman defrauded by fake pastry chef with a photo cropped tight so you couldn't see much. The note was 5 lines. I think this is your guy. He did it to my cousin in 2019, different name. If the detective calls, I'll tell him what we had to do to get our money back. There was a phone number. I passed it to the detective and put the clipping in the back of the binder behind a sheet labeled "Why We Do It Right." That's not legal evidence. It's just a reminder. We hosted a tasting last night for a couple who asked for something like marble but edible. I marbled vanilla and chocolate buttercream on a board with an offset spatula, pressed a patterned mat into it and pulled it off to leave this faint, elegant texture, and watched their shoulders drop. The groom asked if we could do their date in gold leaf. I said yes with the part of me that has learned to keep my promises tight and my possibilities wide. When I locked up, the store was quiet in that way that only happens once all the compressors hit the right pitch and the lights are buzzing friendly and the bread is cooling. I slid the binder into its crate, turned the key, and tugged the cable for good measure. Then I stood for a second with my hand flat on the cool plastic and felt a thing I don't have a word for yet. Authority, maybe. Or just being a person who's finally allowed to build and protect in equal measure. There are still too many sheet cakes in our lives. There's still luster dust behind my ears and a smear of purple ombre that has somehow survived 5 showers. But the kitchen hums. The binder is heavy in a way that means I'm not carrying everything in my head anymore. Jay laughs like she owns the sound. Henry got me a label maker and it is my new religion. And when a hotel chef asks me to show his crew how to make a cake stand tall without lying about gravity, I feel like I got handed a better version of the job I've been doing for a decade. Same buttercream, same turntable on a flipped Cambro, just with the volume turned up on the part I'm best at.